on this Medicaid scam that they're trying to pull. I know, everyone needs jobs, and I agree, everyone does need a job. With health care, with retirement, with decent wages, I'm right there. This ain't it. Quick break, right back.
10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the Battle of the Running Bulls occurred at GM's Fisher Plant No. 2 in Flint, Michigan. It marked the turning point in the Great Flint Sit-Down Strike. Company guards attempted to stop food deliveries to the strikers. When confronted, the guards cleared out and the food deliveries resumed. The guards, however, reported to the local police that strikers were holding them captive. The Flint police soon arrived, throwing tear gas into the picket lines and through plant windows. The sit-downers responded with plant fire hoses and slingshots loaded with door hinges. The police continued to launch tear gas at the picketers. Then the crowd pelted police with any debris they could find. It was at this point that the police began firing indiscriminately into the crowd, seriously wounding 16. Glenora Johnson of the Women's Auxiliary, speaking from the sound truck, called her women to action. She recollected in 1976, quote, that when I appealed to the women of Flint, I said, there are women down here, the mothers of children, and I beg you to come down here and stand with your husbands, your loved ones, your brothers, your sweethearts. Then I saw the first woman struggling, and I noticed when she started to break through and come down that a cop grabbed her coat, and she just kept coming. As soon as that happened, other women broke through, and the cops did not want to fire into the backs of women. When the women did that, the men came naturally, and that was the end of the battle. The Women's Auxiliary would continue to play a vital role throughout the strike.
Sit down, you keep your seat. Sit down and rest your feet. Sit down, you gotta think. Sit down, sit down.
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
No matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Since the prehistoric ages, and the days of ancient Greece, right down to the Middle Ages, planet Earth kept going through changes. And then the Renaissance came, and times continued to change. Nothing stayed the same, but there were always renegades. Keep sitting for.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So today, the news coming, this Seema Verma. She's the head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Again, back to the push that would have states link a work requirement to anyone getting Medicaid. Now, here's the thing. What we already know is that most people who get Medicaid services who aren't disabled, they already work. This, to me, is one of those red herrings. This is one of those things that is supposed to get you all tizzied up and, thinking of the others. And look, here today in Pennsylvania, my email box slammed from right-wing crazy groups. And the anti-union shill group, Citizens Alliance, just hammering me with how wonderful this is going to be, and it's going to help the poor. We're gonna help them go get jobs. And I'm like, okay, I'm all in favor of helping them get jobs, but where are they going to get those jobs if you just say there's a requirement? And we learned this in the 90s with welfare reform. When, if, I don't know. Will we learn? Never. Maybe. Anyway, I've got Rebecca Vallis here on the line. She's the managing director of the Center for American Progress's poverty team. I wanted to get some of her thoughts on this work requirement because, look, some people think, hey, it's a good idea. Let's find out why. Rebecca, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me back, Rick.
So, the right wing makes this really great argument that, we're going to help the poor. We care about the poor. We're going to help them, Rebecca.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that's really horrifying about the news today on Medicaid. I mean, to sort of give your listeners a little bit more background, what happened was we saw a letter come out of the Trump administration from Seema Verna. You named her. She's the sort of queen bee of Medicaid and Medicare and other things at the Trump administration. And she released a letter that went to state Medicaid directors, giving them permission for the first time in the Medicaid program's 5+ decade history, permission to take health insurance away from people who can't find work. That really at its core is what this guidance in the form of a letter that came out today would do. And make no mistake, this is ending Medicaid as we know it. That is what this announcement did. Now, there are 10 states that already had pending applications into the Trump administration asking for permission to do this kind of stuff, as well as other shenanigans in their Medicaid programs that previous administrations had never said were allowable under Medicaid. But this administration has very clearly decided, and Trump personally has very clearly decided, that he's done waiting for Congress to try to destroy Medicaid through legislation. And so he's taking matters into his own tiny hands and deciding he's going to destroy it himself by fiat.
Yeah, but here's the weird thing. You know, I get all these right-wingers who keep saying, you know, during the Obama years, he did everything with the pen. And now I don't hear a peep out of them talking about executive orders.
Yeah, I think, you know, the thing that is maybe most disgusting about the rollout of this new policy, which really is sweeping and unprecedented. I know I said that before, but I'm reiterating it because there are a lot of folks who I think are looking at this and going, is this really that big a deal? It really is a huge deal when it comes to how the Medicaid program operates. It's a fundamental change. But the way that this policy was rolled out today was all puppies and rainbows language about how much we care about helping poor people and community engagement and promoting work. Listen, taking away someone's health insurance isn't going to help them find work any faster. It's actually going to make it a heck of a lot harder for them to pound the pavement looking for work or try to get enough hours at their job, because when people are healthy, that's when they're able to be good workers. That's when they're able to show up on time and thrive in the workplace. When they've lost their health insurance and they're getting sicker, I mean, that's a recipe for pushing people out of the workforce and pushing them further onto the sidelines. And yet they're dressing it all up in this language about wanting to help low-income people. And it's not a mystery why they're doing it. I mean, we need to sort of, call it out when we see it, Rick, and that's part of why I love your show, because that's what you do all day long. But, what this is about reinforcing myths about who are the people in this country who turn to public programs like Medicaid to make ends meet. And this is core to Trump's divide and conquer playbook. That's why he's obsessed with smearing Medicaid and other programs as welfare, a term that he knows very well has a deeply racially charged history. It's about otherizing people who turn to public programs to make ends meet. That's what this push is all about.
But the reality is, there are a lot more white people, I think, on Medicaid than there are of the others. I look at rural America. Honestly and truthfully, most of the people that I know in rural America who are in the lower part of the economic strata who have jobs, they get their health insurance through Medicaid. And it's one of these things where what's kind of scary to me is how easily we as a society are sliced and diced and pitted against one another. Because look, I had someone tell me the other day, if I only made less money, I could get Medicaid and I would have great insurance instead of this crappy insurance my employer gets. And I think a lot of people have this mentality that, I'm going to work, I'm working 40 hours, I'm busting my behind, and I'm falling behind. And yet all of these folks that get, welfare or Medicaid, they're living the high life and I'm paying for it.
And that's the myth out there, and the perception that Trump is looking to play on. I mean, it's totally consistent with what we saw throughout the campaign. He was playing on the very real economic insecurity that families across this country are feeling, wondering, if where their next paycheck is going to come from. Are they going to have a secure retirement? Can they afford college for their kids? He realized during the campaign that a message of populism was going to be really effective, and it worked for him, and a lot of people placed their bets on him to save and bring back their jobs. He's now not only betraying the very people who voted for him, because many of those folks are the ones who are going to be harmed by this kind of policy, but he's also continuing to try to play on that divide and conquer mentality to make it seem like what he's doing is going after some group of others who just don't want to work, rather than that this is part of a continued and ongoing assault on the entire working class and the entire middle class. And sometimes when I talk about work requirements, I like to say that they're premised on three myths about poverty. First, that quote unquote the poor, as it's always said, are some group of people who are poor because they just don't want to work. Second, that anyone who wants a well-paying job can just snap her fingers and make one appear. And the third myth is that having a job is all it takes not to be struggling economically. And that's exactly what you were just hitting on, Rick, right, is that the reality in the 21st century when it comes to poverty and economic insecurity is not one about people not working. It's about people working incredibly hard, but for poverty wages. And Medicaid has increasingly come to play that role as a work support for low-wage workers.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I've always I grew up as a kid in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. So, we were by American standards, dirt poor. And had it not been for some, public health insurance, there have been a couple of times where I probably wouldn't be here. So I see the value in it. But there's part of me that goes, I get the argument from the right of a work requirement, because I do believe everyone should work. My problem is that by saying, okay, there's a work requirement, go find a job, I know that there aren't enough jobs out there. I know the private sector has not and will not create enough jobs for everyone. So there's part of me that goes, okay, if you're going to make this kind of requirement, don't you have to have somewhere where people are going to work? And if the private sector isn't or can't create enough jobs, this is where the public sector should be stepping in to make sure everyone's employed or has the proper hours spent to get whatever their either be welfare or whatever. There's just part of me that kind of buys that a little bit, but there's got to be a way that there's a job there.
No, I think that's exactly right, and I agree with all of your points. And instead of policies like a big public jobs program or even something smaller than that, like maybe a subsidized jobs program, something like we saw during the economic recession a few years ago, none of that is what we're seeing from Trump. What we're seeing is him kicking workers while they're down without giving them any options for climbing out of being in the hole. And you mentioned at the top, right, that most people who receive health insurance through Medicaid are indeed working, but part of what needs to be widely understood here about why this policy is so devastating is about who the other people are who aren't working. So about 6% of the folks who are not currently working who receive Medicaid are actually looking for work. But what about the other folks? 30% reported having caregiver obligations to their children or to a loved one. That's why they're not in the workforce. 15% are in school. 9% are retired. And just over a third report facing serious health problems. So are those the kind of freeloaders that Trump is trying to go after? I mean, it's folks who have very good reasons for why they're not currently working. And what he's trying to do here is to just paper all over all of that with this kind of continued drumbeat of policies that reinforce the myths about who is poor in this country and who these programs are intended to help.
Yeah. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Rebecca Vallis. She's the managing director of the poverty team over at the Center for American Progress. You want to check out their website. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. But here's the thing. This is the other part. And this is what I struggle with with having this conversation at all, is that I believe health care should be an absolute right. I think regardless of your economic status, I think health care should be one of those things. If I have a right to see an attorney and to be represented by an attorney, if I get into trouble, I should have a right to see a doctor when I get sick. So even having this conversation is taking us, I think, off the path of this is a human right. This is something that we should be fighting for universally, and it shouldn't matter if you're rich or poor or working class or whatever. It should be a right. At least that's my thought.
Yeah, I am 100% right there with you, Rick. And yet what we're watching is this continued attack on the health insurance system that we currently have. And I said before, I'll say it again, Trump is very clearly frustrated that Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act are as popular as they are. I mean, he learned the hard way, as did his colleagues in Congress last year when they spent the better part of 2017 trying to repeal the ACA and Medicaid as we know it. They learned the hard way how popular these programs are and how many people out there in this country were willing to stand up. And in many cases, I'm thinking here about the folks at ADAPT and other disability activists, folks literally were willing to put their bodies on the line to save these programs. That is what they mean to the American people. I think he realized that getting legislation done to repeal the ACA and in this case to destroy Medicaid wasn't something that was going to be nearly as easy as he thought it was going to be when he took office. And that's why he's decided to instead move to this kind of backdoor attack on health insurance, hoping that no one's going to notice that he's still coming for their health care. And there's something else I want to mention, Rick, because I think it's really important for folks to understand. The letter that went to state Medicaid directors today about this new policy, it says that Trump's new rules won't apply to people who receive Medicaid on the basis of a disability. And a lot of news outlets have actually gotten it wrong and said, oh, look, Trump is protecting people with disabilities from losing their health insurance if they're not working. But if you actually read deeper into the guidance, you find out that people with disabilities aren't protected at all. Only people who receive Medicaid in that very specific category. So the Trump administration knows full well that they're going after people who have serious illnesses, chronic health conditions, serious disabilities, and they're going to take away their health insurance if they're not working enough hours. That's what's on the line here, in addition to everything else that we just talked about. And that's what this administration thinks is good policy when it comes to health care.
Yeah, and to me, I look at this as another one of these, the death of 1,000 paper cuts. This is another attack on the ACA, another attack on Medicaid, and and the backdoor way of going through and destroying what they couldn't do legislatively.
That's exactly what this is. And Trump is banking on his hope that this letter is going to go out, that states are all going to, get their waivers approved and things are just going to move forward. If he thinks that's going to be an easy path, he has another thing coming. There is a wave of lawsuits that is about to hit the Trump administration because what they're trying to do, many legal advocates have said in the wake of the announcement today, it's actually illegal. It violates the Medicaid statute, which makes very clear that you cannot condition health insurance receipt through Medicaid on your work status. You just can't do it. That's not how the Medicaid program works. So I think he's got some serious litigation that he's going to have to start bracing for, and progressives across this country and people generally who care about health care and view it as a human right, like you and I do, are going to be standing up and saying that we're not going to stand for this.
Yeah, I mean, the fortunate thing is that he is fairly inept, and he's surrounded himself with people who are somewhat inept. Because look, if they really had their act together, they could do an awful lot of damage. I mean, this is they're still working to try and do damage, but as you pointed out, this is not something he can do. They're going to try, and they're going to tie themselves up in knots for a while. and that is the hope why 2018, I believe, is so important. And this, another in a long list of election year issues that we need to have right on the front of our mind.
That is exactly right. And you know, with all of the news coverage in the last few weeks saying, you know, if it doesn't look like maybe Mitch McConnell in the Senate wants to play ball with this quote-unquote welfare reform agenda that Trump and Speaker Paul Ryan over on the House side have said they wanted to focus 2018 on. So there's a lot of folks saying, oh, well, maybe we actually don't have to worry about them going after Medicaid and Medicare and nutrition assistance and housing and all of the things that help working families in this country make ends meet and get ahead. I think what we've seen today is that is patently false. Trump is looking for any opportunity he can find to dismantle those kinds of programs, and he doesn't care what the American people think. He's going to do it over the objections of folks in communities across this country who have raised their voices and raised them loudly for the last year, saying, hands off my Medicaid.
Yeah, I mean, it's and look, it's going to take us loud in the streets, contacting representatives, especially on the state level, because this then comes to the state level. And again, I keep telling my friends here in Pennsylvania, one of the most gerrymandered states in the country, this is why you really need to be looking at who your representative is, because it's this kind of stuff that flows down. And like I said, there's already a representative here in Pennsylvania who's pushing this through, who wants, we're gonna force them to go get jobs because we're helping them, because we care.
That's exactly right. And for listeners who, want to know what they can be doing, the first thing to do is to spread the word about what this really is. This isn't about community engagement or promoting work. This is about taking health insurance away from people who can't find work or who can't work the number of hours that Trump thinks they should be working. Somewhat ironic, given the big reveals from the past couple of days about how little work Trump himself actually does.
And again, I'm okay with that. The more executive time he has, the less damage he can do.
Well, hey, I'm not opposed to it myself, given who's in the White House and what executive time means in terms of how much safer the rest of us can feel. So I'm with you on that.
In fact, someone scoop him a third scoop of ice cream.
That's right, and he can wash it down with his Diet Coke.
There you go.
But people need to be having these conversations, sharing on social media, sharing with their friends and neighbors, just because there are so many myths and misconceptions out there, not just about the programs, but about what Trump is really trying to do, what his policies are about, and whose side he's really on. And then as this fight does develop in the states, there are already 10 states where this is actively going to be an issue. Kentucky is the first where we expect the Trump administration to approve one of these blank checks to do all kinds of these shenanigans, including throwing people off of Medicaid if they're not working as much as Trump thinks they should be. The states will follow from there. But people need to be paying attention, recognizing that there is a lot that we can do, and some of that's going to be about influencing governors, telling them no, hands off Medicaid. Don't go take Trump up on this offer. But then there's also going to be individual legislative vehicles, like you just said, in states that are inspired by this, and that's something people need to stay vigilant for and continue to raise their voices about it and talk to their elected officials. This is not something we're going to stand for. That needs to be heard loud and clear.
Right there with you. Rebecca, I appreciate you taking some time, filling us in. Love to talk to you again as this continues down the road.
Thanks so much. And folks can go to handsoff.org if they want to join the fight with us at the Center for American Progress.
There we go. We'll make sure we get a link. Thanks so much. Good stuff.
Thanks, Rick.
Rebecca Vallis, Managing Director there at the Poverty Team at the Center for American Progress. We'll make sure we get a link at thericksmithshow.com if you can check out and participate in the action. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day a strike launched one of the most iconic rallying cries of the U.S. labor movement. 20,000, mostly women workers, in the Lawrence, Massachusetts textile mills began what became known as the Bread and Roses Strike. Led by the industrial workers of the world, the strike was one of the most important events in the history of women workers. The phrase bread and roses had been used a year earlier by poet John Oppenheim. He published his poem in the American Magazine. His first verse read, "As we come marching, marching, in the beauty of the day, a million darkened kitchens, 1,000 mill lofts gray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses, for the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses." The second stanza continued, "As we come marching, marching, unnumbered women dead, go crying through our singing, their ancient cry for bread. Small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits knew. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too." The poem described a call by workers not just for bread or better wages for the basic needs of life. It also called for roses, a life that could include time for beauty and meaning. In 1976, Mimi Farina, the sister of Joan Baez, put the lyrics to music. In 2000, a filmmaker used the title Bread and Roses for his story of unionization efforts of Mexican workers in Los Angeles. And for the past century, the image of bread and roses has continued to capture the imagination of working people standing up for their rights.
As we come marching, marching, we bring the greater days. For the rising of the women means the
Like what you hear?
rising
Check out
of
more at
the
laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
I got news for you, and it's going down. Before you come home and tell me you're not angry, and I'll be leaving town.
Ah, yes, the word of the day. Can't even say it. It's a big, giant asshole. Yeah, I can't wait for school tomorrow. I can't wait for the kids. I wonder how many kids are going to get thrown out of school tomorrow for saying that. But the president said it. I know when I was in school, I would have said it. I know I would have gone and say, hey, if the president can say it, if the president's allowed to say it, I should be able to say it too. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world with our good friend Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So the word of the day, big giant, the S-hole.
Well, I don't know.
Can you
I've
believe
thrown
a
all day
president of the
already.
United States actually said that?
Well, now that, yes, I do. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I can't believe what he said, but yes, I would believe it. Only because I remember hearing seeing Bush staffers saying the president doesn't cuss. Well, I don't want to get you thrown off the air, but I was on Air Force One, and he belted out a few goodies. So, yeah, I do believe that presidents do say, you know.
No. I look, I'm not putting them up on a
Yeah.
pedestal and say they don't use, but in that kind of a forum, I mean,
Oh, no. No,
I
I-
understand when the
no,
doors are
no.
closed, calling you everything but a decent human being. I get that.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry, I took you wrong, but yeah, I was going to say they do say things, but no, in a forum, not usually, especially if you say it in front of, if you've told your secretary you've told one too many people in politics, first of all.
True.
And second of all, you say it in front of, 3 or 4 or 5 members of Congress. It's like, who's going to rush out the door to tell it first?
And that's what happened.
Sure.
But here again, I mean, it kind of shows a mindset, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to think anymore, what to expect, the unexpected, I guess, but it's not really unexpected.
No, it's not. But what I find interesting is he's questioning, why can't we get people here from Norway? I go, well, because we don't have national health insurance. There's a thought. Maybe if you got better health care, maybe we'd get people from Norway.
Well, also Norway, I've been to Norway. I've been to Stockholm. I've been to, 72 countries. And they're countries fairly progressed. People really aren't, trying to get out of them. They'll go travel, but they aren't like, oh, I got to get out of here.
No,
other
because
countries.
they're pretty well off. They got health care, they got education, decent infrastructure, decent opportunities, decent wages. Why would you want to leave?
I mean, if it was phrased in a way during a meeting where somebody says, "Look," like for example, I'll give you a great example. I've been in Afghanistan, right? And I have friends in Afghanistan, but I will tell you, it's a country that is in the 11th century.
Yeah.
It's just, and Pakistan is horrible. I've called it a cesspool of terrorism.
No, and I'm with you. There are places that
yeah.
are horrible places.
Right.
But for the president of the United States,
yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. One could say, look, we're letting people in from countries that, it's bad in those countries. The mindset could be tough for here. But the way he did it, I'm lost for words.
now, do you think this plays well with his base? Because look, I think when I saw it, I'm going, you know what? Look, Africa kind of is it's a horrible place in a lot of places. I get that.
Yeah, but I don't know that it'll play that well. I mean, there's a lot of people that support President Trump that aren't just, the despicables or the, quote, racist. I mean, there's a lot of people that support him, that question him, but do support him, that are of fairly rational mind. But I don't think they're going to like this. I don't think, using that terminology.
We will see in the next bit of polling. To be honest,
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
know how
curious.
much lower he can go.
I don't know. I'm very curious to see.
Now, today, the House extended the FISA, reauthorized FISA, I guess, for what is it, another 5 or 6 years?
It's 6. Yes.
6. But right this morning, the president tweets out something contradictory to what they were doing.
Well, yeah, he sort of stirred everything, and Nancy Pelosi took an interesting move, which I think was a good move for her. But it's the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, and the president got into how the dossier and the information, et cetera, was led into the FISA court based on the premise we know now from Senator Feinstein's transcript she released on Steele, that Steele was making a comment about a presidential candidate blackmailed, et cetera. So anyway, Trump tweeted basically to the effect that, yeah, this is the court that leaked this information, or they call it unmasking of an American of a name. Well, anyway, Nancy Pelosi read that and took it that, okay, he's against the bill. What are we doing? What are we wasting this effort for? And so she went to Paul Ryan and asked that the bill be pulled. I'm sure phone calls went back and forth to the White House. The White House said, no, he's talking about, not having names released, but this court's for the bad guys, what the tweet or the answer said. So bottom line is they went ahead and reauthorized the bill in the House, about 264 votes, I think it was, and it'll now head to the Senate where Rand Paul wants to do a filibuster on it. To the substance of the bill, Rick, I think that the House really, I'm surprised that the far left and the far right did not come together to make some things happen to affect change in that bill. I'm just honestly shocked at it, and but they didn't. I think there could have been, some changes. I think it's not crafted correctly, never has been. I supported the FISA court because I voted against the Patriot Act, and I thought, well, at least maybe this is some kind of hopeful, probable cause look, but I think it just has become rubber stamp.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I was concerned about at the beginning. I mean, especially when you can go and do it and then petition the court after you've already done it.
Right, and then the court, technically you really don't have to have much standing to do it. And just so people, in case they're confused, just give you a good scenario. Let's say that you're a small business person, you're buying some products from Europe out of the country, and you're dealing with another company. That other company has some form of suspicious ties to terrorism, or it's some entity that's terrorist-based. And all of a sudden, you then, as a result of this, are indirectly brought into the FISA court to be under surveillance, and it could cause, obviously a lot of problems. So, and then your name could be known. It could be, released. So I think there's a lot of safeguards that they could have put in, or at least a couple of measures, but nobody did anything. I think that was the disappointing thing of it.
Yeah, I was expecting at least some, because you're right. It's there's the people on the left and the right who on the extremes who could have come together and put up a little bit of a resistance, but you're right, there wasn't.
No, and maybe in the Senate, though, I don't think Mitch McConnell would do anything. He'll go right down the line, but maybe somebody in the Senate can combine with Ron Paul. Rand Paul, is a libertarian, and maybe somebody can combine with him and hopefully get some kind of amendment to clean it up.
Yeah. Were you surprised by Rand Paul's whining tirade on TV the other day that he was all upset that nobody cared about him?
Well, yeah, I think he's had a trauma here. From what I understand from this whole thing, I mean, this doctor just shocked, right out of nowhere did this, and I don't know. I think he's been traumatized by it. Now, his recovery time. I think he got pretty emotional about it.
Right, but I think most people want to know why. I mean, anytime you see an attack out of the blue, there's got to be a reason why, and I think people are just wired to going, okay, so you're okay now. So why did this happen to you? What happened? What did you do? Because look, if it just came out of the blue, then you throw the book at this guy. But there was talk of yard waste. I'm going, yard waste, really? I mean, it's a whole different scenario based on what it is you've done, I think.
But the guy still came into his yard and blindsided him in his yard. If the guy wanted to foul something against him, he should have. I mean, I think the guy's got to be unbalanced to, no matter what your grievance, you can't go in somebody's yard and then all of a sudden tackle them so hard you break their ribs.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Good point. Unless we're talking about, because my first thought was,
now if Rand Paul went over and slapped one of his kids,
yeah, I mean, what of that? Messing around with the wife, something.
Right.
If it's that, then you deserved a good butt whipping.
Right.
If it's just yard waste, you're blowing stuff into his yard. That's a whole nother. Now you're unbalanced. And now I'll give Rand Paul some sympathy. There you go.
I don't think he'll keep his license. So.
Aren't we living in just really very crazy times?
I was telling Alan Ratner the other day, doing the news, I've been doing this for 8 years, and I was in public office 24 years, and now doing the news it's bizarro. It's like something out of a Superman book, bizarro. I mean, it just doesn't stop.
Would you go back to being a public servant? Would you go back to wanting to run for office?
Oh, you know what? I used to think about it because our local newspaper, and people probably are saying, you've got to be kidding me by my next statement, but our local newspaper twice publicly, the publisher said I ought to run again. And I had some radio people say I ought to run again down in the Ohio Valley. And Alan Ratner was driving me crazy to run, and I actually started thinking about it, and I think one night I couldn't sleep, and I woke up at 1 in the morning, and they were all on the floor of the house. And I thought, no, I don't want to do that anymore.
No, I told you the one time I said, look, I'll donate money to your campaign.
Yeah,
we need sane, rational Republicans in office. We do.
I worked with Steny Hoyer. We passed massive, reforms in the election systems. I carried the African American Museum for John Lewis. I carried that into law. We did a lot of things, and but I'm not sure. I don't think I could run today because I just don't think you can. I don't think anybody can do anything anymore. Something's got lost.
Do you agree with Trump that we need to bring earmarks back and all of that?
Well, I'm okay. I'll tell you, I'm okay with earmarks, and always
too.
have been. And I'll tell you why. It can be that the people that you elect in Pennsylvania and Ohio, for me, that they work with locals, and they know, the locals want a highway, they want a museum, or whatever they want, And who knows better than the local elected person who they work with locals? Now, versus somebody who's from, not to pick on my cousin's state of California, but somebody from California sitting there in the bureaucracy and says, well, let's see, what would I give Pennsylvania or Ohio? I mean, unelected people who have no concept of need, who you can't petition. Locals in the community can't put any pressure on them. I think it's a dumb way to try to get everything, you know.
No, I'm right there with you. And when the whole
Yeah.
argument against pork was going on, I'm going, no. I'm not opposed to pork. I actually think it's good. I think it's good for the economy, creates jobs in every local district, and you got every congressman going, hey, I got to bring home something. I actually think it's a good thing.
I always thought it was. Now, you know, you're going to have some problems. I was part of an article yesterday, which was kind of really weird. I was part of an article that earmarks shouldn't come back because look what happened with Jack Abramoff, and I didn't do an earmark for Jack. I didn't do one. There was nothing entered as an earmark anywhere. He asked me to put language in another bill with Chris Dodd, and I didn't do it. Now, Duke Cunningham took a watch or a Rolls Royce. I don't know what he took. But anyway,
he got the yacht.
He took something. And yacht. And, okay, that happens. It's not good. That doesn't mean the whole system's in heart failure. In fact, they can only use a couple of examples, you know.
Right. No, I'm with you. And look,
okay.
at the end of the day, that's how we get we get things done. I mean, if our infrastructure probably wouldn't be as crumbling and as bad off as it is if we would have still had some of those things.
Right.
Last bit I've got for you. What do you think about the good relationship with Kim Jong Un? Did Trump have a conversation with him, or didn't he?
I don't think he did. I can't imagine he did. No.
I can't imagine he did either. But you know, why wouldn't you say that? Why would you leave that open?
I don't know. I don't know why he would say it. I don't know.
Because I don't see any diplomatic.
He can't have done it.
I don't see any diplomatic advantage to that statement whatsoever. I don't.
Well, also, there's no advantage of me as a citizen. If he says he gets along with you, I'm sitting there going, why? What advantage does he have? By the way, I just got a notice that the president's going to travel to a southwestern Pennsylvania congressional district next week in an effort to head off a second special election embarrassment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an embarrassment anyway, because if you remember Murphy, the guy who was anti-abortion, who was messing around with his mistress, and maybe she was pregnant and then trying to strong-arm her into an abortion, he had to resign.
Right. So that's the district he's heading
That's the district he's heading to.
I mentioned that because you're Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's one of those funny districts where you go, this was your guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be 2018 here in Pennsylvania is going to be an amazing year.
Yeah.
I think Trump is going to buy a house here.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing.
It is what it is. But Bob, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. European Union leaders are urging President Trump to stick with the 2015 Iran deal during a week in which Trump is required to certify or not certify Iran's continued compliance. British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson stressed that Iran is complying with the agreement, and he said those who doubt the efficacy of the deal should propose concrete alternatives instead of just lobbing insults.
I think it's incumbent on those who oppose the JCPOA really to come up with that better solution, because we haven't seen it so far.
German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel, meanwhile, suggested that at a time the world is trying to contain North Korea, that ripping up the Iran deal would send precisely the wrong message.
It would send a very dangerous signal to the rest of the world if the only agreement which prevents us from the proliferation of nuclear weapons would be negative affected.
President Trump faces a Friday deadline over whether to reimpose sanctions on Iran that were taken down following the 2015 nuclear agreement. The U.S. State Department has unveiled a new travel warning system using a 1 to 4 ranking to grade countries from safest to most dangerous. One country that ranks high up on the threat level is Mexico. On Wednesday, the State Department urged Americans to avoid all travel to 5 Mexican states in a new warning. The Level 4 Do Not Travel alert for Colima, Guerrero, Michoacan, Sinaloa, and Tamaulipas states places those areas on a similar footing as war-torn countries like Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Libya. The State Department cited high levels of violent crime and gang activity in each of those Mexican states. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Janice sent me an email during the break. Again, on the S-hole comment. Janice sent the email saying, to show you what an idiot Trump and his minions are, 43% of immigrants from African countries have bachelor's degrees. I didn't know that. She points out that while 33% of Americans have advanced degrees, she also points out that they have a higher median income. And, look, they work hard. She points out maybe before the Trump can spew their hatred, they should get their facts straight and maybe work as hard as the African immigrants. Thanks for the email, Janice. I appreciate it. Did not know 43% of them have bachelor's degrees. But here's the thing. This is part of the problem when you have someone like Trump spewing this kind of nonsense. At some point, all the backslapping and the ha-ha kind of jumps and bites you in the behind. One really quick thing before we wrap up this hour of the program. Evidently, right now, as we speak, the Commerce Department has put forth their case, the Section 232 Steele investigation report. They have given to the White House. The White House now has 90 days to do something on this. Now, remember, Trump wanted this back in April, said it'd be done by the end of June, and they were going to act on it. This is last year. So the hope is that, don't take the whole 90 days. You don't need executive time. What's interesting is steel imports have risen in 2017 almost 18%. And this is the president who was supposed to be the one who was going to save the steel industry. You have a chance. Back in August, you had 25 senior executives from U.S. steel companies sending a letter to Trump saying, hey, do something. Now is time to do something. Get to work. And I would suggest now. Anyway, for those listeners who are hearing us on stations who only carry the first hour of the program, feel free to join us over at thericksmithshow.com, where you can pick up the rest of the show or get the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher or Podbean. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show. Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. It's being reported that close advisors and friends of President Trump are saying, hey, don't sit down for the interview. Don't do it. Don't sit down with Robert Mueller. Some are expressing skepticism. If there were any circumstances at which would make any sense for Trump to voluntarily submit to an interview. And I got to be honest, if I was advising him, knowing how he has done in past depositions, knowing how he has the tendency to just rattle and rattle, I would tell him don't go anywhere near it. But again, as I've been saying, I would love to have this on pay-per-view. I think it would be extremely entertaining. And here to get his thoughts on this and the big comments of the day, the giant S-hole comments, I've asked Bill Scheer to come talk with us, contributing editor over at Politico magazine. Bill, thanks for taking time for us.
Always great to talk to you.
So what do you think? If you were advising the Donald, submit to an interview or not?
Well, I'm not a legal expert, so forgive me if I'm giving you incorrect information. But my understanding is, if he refused to do an interview, he could get subpoenaed and forced to do an interview. And if he was subpoenaed, I believe that deposition would then be videotaped. The thing that Trump wants to avoid is having his interview be videotaped. So if he's not subpoenaed, if he's doing it voluntarily, they could negotiate the terms in theory. And I think right now they're probably saying, his lawyers are probably saying to Mueller, oh, he'll do it if the questions are in written form.
Right.
And Mueller's probably saying, we have to do this face to face. That's probably where the dance is happening right now. But if Trump is too stubborn, you might get hold of him from a video camera.
Which again, I would love to see. I think you put it on pay-per-view, we could solve some of our national debt problems.
Well, this is what happened with Bill Clinton. I mean, Bill Clinton the reason why you know about him saying, definition of is because he got subpoenaed and forced to do it in front of a camera. And there's no way Trump gets out of an interview without telling some sort of lie. That's kind of what he does. And the Republican argument in the Clinton days was perjury is impeachable. Now, I don't think it's a glide path to Trump being impeached and convicted if he did something like that, because you're still going to need a 2/3 vote in the Senate, and that would require Republican help, which is probably not forthcoming. But it would certainly raise the temperature for impeachment if he did something like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, at the end of it, I want to see him testify, because at the end of this, I want to get to the bottom of what did he know, when did he know it, and what did they do? Personally, I don't think he was involved in collusion, but I do think some of his people were enticed in, and I've been saying this from the beginning. I think their arrogance and their ambition were used against them.
Well, and I'm not the first person to note this. Collusion itself is not a crime. They could literally be plotting with Putin himself to tip the election. That in and of itself is not a crime. If there was money laundering associated with it, if there was lying to the investigators to try to cover it up, if there was obstruction of justice on Trump's part to prevent these things from coming out, that stuff would be illegal. And I think those are the areas that Mueller is probably digging into.
Right, honestly, the collusion's not illegal, but it would really turn the base if you were colluding with a foreign adversarial power.
Well, I wouldn't assume that, quite frankly. I don't think the people in his base see Putin as our adversary. I think, if this was 40 years ago, this was the Cold War, doing that sort of thing with Russia would have ideological overtones. You're trying to subvert capitalism and freedom and democracy. Now it's just whose team are you on? Putin's on Trump's team? Great. We're on the same team. That's wonderful. And not, I won't put this on the shoulders of every Trump supporter, but there are white nationalists out there that see Putin as on their team, as someone who is fighting against multiculturalism and secularism and all that and that kind of thing. Putin is very anti-gay. That appeals to some social conservatives. So the fact that Trump and Putin have, at some degree, a relationship does not bother a lot of diehard Trump supporters.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'll be honest, I had never thought in my lifetime I would see an administration cozy up to Russia as this one has.
It's disturbing, obviously, and I think it requires a lot of it. The short complaint is this is a violation of our sovereignty and that sort of thing. But we need to have a deeper discussion about what is America's foreign policy objectives here, and how is Russia trying to undermine that? If we fall into the trap of, oh, we're all bad, we're all terrible, We all meddle in other people's affairs, and what's the difference here? I think that's a dangerous place for us to go. There needs to be a liberal, progressive foreign policy vision that shows that what Putin does is not what America does, and clear out what America should be doing.
Right. No, I'm with you. But at the end of the day, you've got all these. You got the Democrats came out with a report. I think it was yesterday saying, "Look, we know that the Russians have colluded in the elections or have meddled in the elections of at least 19 countries. They've been doing it for 2 decades. They've done it here, and yet we've got an administration vehemently denying anything could have happened."
And they're going to keep denying it because there's a good chance that Putin's going to get involved in the midterm. I mean, they scored a victory in 2016. There's no incentive for them to stop.
Right.
And as much as we complain about it now, are they going to find another soft underbelly, another point of division in the American electorate to exploit and try to turn American against American?
Well, I think the old playbook from last time would work just well. I mean, those divisions haven't healed. Those, pitting white against black, male against female, that stuff hasn't healed.
A lot of it hasn't. I do think there is a higher sensitivity to what the Russians are up to, certainly on the left, and perhaps that would help inoculate us from that, or just simply our ire against Trump is strong enough that it overwhelms the other differences that we see, along racial lines or gender lines or what have you. But it hasn't been fully tested yet. My guess is, this is just me speculating, you look at what happened in Virginia in 2017, in Alabama in 2017, there were opportunities for Democrats to divide amongst themselves in both of those races, and it did not occur. No. People said, whatever, however much Ralph Northam is going to lean right, he's going to run scared against sanctuary cities. I don't like it, but you know what? We got to stop Ed Gillespie. We just got to pull together and stop Ed Gillespie. If Doug Jones is not embracing single payer, I don't care. I'm a Bernie Crat. I don't care. We got to stop Roy Moore. We saw that unity happen in those states. My guess is we'll see that unity in 2018 because it's not going to be the same kind of race as 2020. 2020 is a presidential primary. You're going to have 10 to 15 Democratic candidates. One of them's probably going to be Bernie Sanders. One of them's probably going to be Joe Biden. There's going to be a demand on the Democratic primary voter to choose an ideological path, to choose, do we need to have a non-white male, or do we need to have a Democratic socialist, or do we need to have a Rust Belt figure like Joe Biden?
No, we need Oprah.
That debate's unavoidable in 2020. It is avoidable, I think, in 2018.
We need Oprah.
Well, if Oprah jumped in, and this is, very, very speculative, there are certain people who are saying, look, Oprah's the full package. Not only would she galvanize youth, she'd galvanize people of color. She has a bond with white working class women that goes back decades. Yeah. And so she is the perfect candidate to go up the middle to get that Rust Belt back. You have other folks on the popular left saying the last thing we need is a billionaire from the top 1%. We need someone who's going to fight against the top 1%. So even she, as popular as she is, probably can't be an immediate unifier. Just there was a poll that came out today, and granted it's a very tiny sample and it's very early, but it had Biden at 26 and Bernie at 21 and Oprah at 20. So and Warren was just behind Oprah. So right away, you have that level of division right off the top. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be a bitter division, but the risk is there.
Now, I was joking about Oprah. I'm actually probably one of the few people who know almost nothing about her. I've never watched the show. I never watched any of her shows. I know none of her positions. And I know there are some people who are, I'm going to vote for her. Well, what does she stand for? I would like, again, the ideological part. I'd like to know what the issues are.
Well, I don't think that's really spelled out yet. She has not been all that ideological in her time. And for those who that's important, they're going to want to, see the evidence. And she's going to be put through, if she runs, which I doubt. But if she did, she'd be put through her paces. But she has a parallel to Trump in that not just that they're both celebrities, not just that they're both wealthy, but they're both, in their own way, self-help gurus. that have built bonds with the public over a long period of time. And we saw with Trump, that took him a long way. People said, your celebrity and wealth is evidence of your credibility and your accomplishment. And Oprah's more of a rags to riches story. I mean, Trump was inherited wealth that he spun into a larger fortune. Oprah's more rags to riches, literally the only African-American woman billionaire in the entire world, and did so in a way that said to her fans, I know the secrets to living better, and I can help you live better. And Trump was, I know how to be rich, and I can help you be rich. So there's evidence that's good vote getting material.
Yeah. I remember the Trump seminars that went around the country, claiming the exact same thing. They were teaching you how to flip houses, and I know people who went to them, and they got fleeced, but they're still happy that they went.
That's right. I mean, and they don't say blame Trump for it. They might blame themselves in some way or blame some external factor. They think Trump knows the answer, and Trump's pitch was, I'm going to use my innate genius to help you do better.
You, the little people.
And he plays up things like I saved Carrier from their job shipping off to Mexico, and he doesn't mention when Carrier does ship jobs off to Mexico. People are tired now, Walmart is raising their minimum wage because we got the tax cut, and they're not mentioning that they just laid off a whole bunch of people from Sam's Club. So that's Trump's, three-card Monty to try to say, I'm still doing stuff for you, and we'll see if people buy it, come 2020. It would seem as of this moment that a lot of people aren't buying it. I mean, his polls are worse than his vote total and have been for the entire course of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I keep asking people, especially Democrats and my labor friends, what are you going to do with the anger of 2016 when Trump doesn't deliver and he actually makes things worse? How do you grab those people who were the Trump voters and swing them back to reality?
Well, if it's manifestly obvious that we're in a worse place in this year in November or 2 years from now, that's going to be an easy argument. It may not be a clear-cut case. The success or regression may be uneven. It may depend where exactly you sit, what part of the country, what industry that you're in. Right now with the tax cut bill, with the tax reform bill, I would argue Republicans are overselling it. Trump's up there saying this is a massive Christmas gift for everybody, and it's not a giant windfall for most folks. There are even some folks whose taxes are going to go up. It's not most people, but it's some people. You're not even going to know exactly where you stand until April 2019 when you actually do your taxes. You might get a bump in your withholding, but that's going to be minor and subtle for most folks. But Democrats are out there with the risk of underselling things. They're going out there saying this is a huge increase in the middle class. Well, that's true when you look out to 2025,
right,
when the tax cut expires for individuals. But most people aren't going to judge it based on 7 years from now. They're going to base on it how I'm feeling now. And if they feel in November 2018, not just on the tax front, but how is my overall cost of living? Am I doing better in general than I was a year and a half ago? And that's going to factor in how have my health care premiums gone up or down? It's taking that gender piece out of Obamacare, does that make my health insurance costs go up? If that negated my tax cut, well, I'm not very happy. What if states and localities raise their taxes because they're losing federal aid, and that wipes away whatever tax cut benefit I got? I'm not going to blame my mayor for that. I'm going to blame Trump for that. What happens to my grocery bill prices? Trump's threatening to get out of NAFTA. He's saying, I think it's going to help the American market. Very well could. It's also possible that it causes a price shock at the grocery store because imported food becomes more expensive. If there's a 20% increase in your grocery bill, you might be mad about that. There's just so much uncertainty out there as far as how they're going to feel about their economic standing come this November in 2020.
No, I'm with you. I mean, at the end of it, it comes back to the Reagan, question. Are you better off than you were, with the last guy? I get it. And we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. And you're right. I mean, maybe people aren't going to be thinking down the road. I tend to look at, bigger picture. I know that my taxes are going to go up at the end of this whole thing. It just is what it is. I did want to get your thoughts before I let you go on this this Wall Street Journal interview, and it's one of these things that just kind of grabbed me. That Trump said, I probably have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. He said, I have relations with people. I think you people are surprised. He went on to say that that, he was asked if he had spoken with Kim Jong-un, and he said, I don't want to comment on it. I'm not saying that I have or I haven't. I just don't want to comment on it. Anything? Do you read anything into that?
I mean, I don't think there's any chance he actually has spoken to him directly. That I think that would be very, very surprising. I do think that I'm not really convinced Trump is dying to have a nuclear war. I don't think that's what he got this to do. I think he likes doing deals. I think he likes talking to strongmen. I think he likes doing business with them. I think he likes talking trash, which is not is the distance between his desire to talk trash and be a tough guy and his love of doing deals with strongmen. So you have this whiplash effect where one day he sounds like the war is going to be tomorrow, and the next day it sounds like peace is in the offing. So my general sense is that he likes having it both ways and doesn't like actually having. I don't think he really wants to start a fresh war. I mean, obviously, you wake up on the wrong side of the bed one morning and prove that sentiment wrong. But I think that's sort of evidence of how he likes to take his foot off the gas in terms of North Korea.
Or he just got an extra scoop of ice cream. I don't know. I literally every day it's a new world when you read his Twitter feed and you see some of the stuff that comes out of there.
Well, with immigration, yesterday it sounded like he was dying to do an immigration deal. He was willing to take the heat for coverage of immigration reform. He loves the heat, so don't worry about that. And today he's acting like a total racist when it comes to immigrants from countries where people are not white, which obviously poisons the ability for Democrats to do any kind of deal with them. How do you do a deal with someone who's being fervently racist? So there's always and that's a case where Trump's mercurialness actually hinders the possibility of a deal. It is harder for Democrats to do a deal with someone who is untrustworthy on these subjects. In the case of North Korea, inaction means no war. I mean, if it's just a ping pong back and forth about his tone, that probably means status quo when we don't have a nuclear war.
Well, if that's the best we can get, I'm almost okay with that.
That'd be a great Woodrow Wilson's slogan in 1960 was he kept us out of war. Trump's could be I didn't nuke anybody. I'll be happy.
There you go. Bill, I appreciate the thoughts. I appreciate the time. Thanks so much, man.
Always a pleasure.
Good stuff. Bill Scheer. You want to check out some of his work? We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. He's a contributing editor over there at Politico Magazine. Good stuff. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Time to talk.
Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the Battle of the Running Bulls occurred at GM's Fisher Plant No. 2 in Flint, Michigan. It marked the turning point in the Great Flint Sit-Down Strike. Company guards attempted to stop food deliveries to the strikers. When confronted, the guards cleared out and the food deliveries resumed. The guards, however, reported to the local police that strikers were holding them captive. The Flint police soon arrived, throwing tear gas into the picket lines and through plant windows. The sit-downers responded with plant fire hoses and slingshots loaded with door hinges. The police continued to launch tear gas at the picketers. Then the crowd pelted police with any debris they could find. It was at this point that the police began firing indiscriminately into the crowd, seriously wounding 16. Glenora Johnson of the Women's Auxiliary, speaking from the sound truck, called her women to action. She recollected in 1976, quote, that when I appealed to the women of Flint, I said, there are women down here, the mothers of children, and I beg you to come down here and stand with your husbands, your loved ones, your brothers, your sweethearts. Then I saw the first woman struggling, and I noticed when she started to break through and come down that a cop grabbed her coat, and she just kept coming. As soon as that happened, other women broke through, and the cops did not want to fire into the backs of women. When the women did that, the men came naturally, and that was the end of the battle. The Women's Auxiliary would continue to play a vital role throughout the strike.
Sit down, just keep your
information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left, rich out of farm red. My father's son left a cameo, blue denim, had his vein. Oh, he's a working class man.
So the big news this morning, the big news was Walmart was going to up their minimum wage. All new employees were going to make at least $11 an hour. That was the big news. The headline-grabbing news. And it was all over the place. Everywhere I looked. Walmart's raising their minimum wage to $11 an hour. And, you know, for all of those people saying, oh, we can't have a minimum wage increase, it's bad for business. No, we actually need a jump in the minimum wage. We need something that's going to bring wages up a little bit. They've been stagnant and declining for too long. And look, this is a good thing. Walmart said they're going to go to the $11 an hour. They're also going to expand parental leave, and they're also going to give some of their employees a one-time $1,000 bonus. Now, look, that's purely PR. So they spent a lot of time and energy pumping out the fact that they're raising their minimum wage to $11 an hour. They're expanding the parental leave, and they're going to give a one-time bonus of $1,000 to some employees. What they didn't spend a lot of time talking about was the fact that they're going to be closing 63 of their Sam's Club stores, some of them immediately, abruptly, right now. Most of the workers, no warning whatsoever. Now, as I understand, maybe they're going to turn some of them into e-distribution centers, and those employees can then go and reapply, which I always love. You know, you had a job before it went, they kicked you to the curb, same company, same building. You can reapply for your old job if you'd like. Of course, at lower starting wages, of course. But what grabbed my attention more than both of those headlines was how the politicos were grabbing on to look at Walmart. Look at how wonderful they are. Paul Ryan said today marks 20 days since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act became the law of the land. Already, this new law is helping to improve the lives of middle-income families across the country. You saw the announcement from Walmart just this morning. More than 1 million Americans are due to receive their bonuses because of tax reform. Now, one, I would argue that the employees at Walmart are not middle income. I would argue that they're unfortunately below that. I would like to see them be middle income. This $1,000 bonus is not going to be that. If you really wanted to do something, give them a $1,000 a year raise so that it's not just a one-time gimmicky thing. And this is the thing that's really driven me nuts about all these companies who are really taking advantage of this huge windfall. Because look, they're going to make out massively. But what this is an amazing bit of political theater. It's hey, see, we're sharing the wealth. Look, we're going to give $1,000 to our employees. It's not the $4,000 that Trump promised, now, mind you, but it is $1,000. And I'm not poo-pooing it away. Look, $1,000 is $1,000. These folks are going to need it. Now, understand bonus rates can probably tax at a much higher rate, but it'll work out in the laundry. The interesting thing is how these politicos like Paul Ryan and others are using this. And as Bill Scheer was talking about, it's not so cut and dry that the average American is going to get the fact that over the long haul, we're all screwed under this tax plan. It's not cut and dry that, next election cycle or the one after that we're going to realize that all of the changes, especially in blue states who had higher state and local taxes, which you can no longer deduct because of this, it's not clear and cut and dry that people are going to get it. And this is one of those things that just kind of makes me go, I'm guardedly optimistic for 2018. I think what we've seen come out of this administration is a lot of chaos, is a lot of bravado, is a lot of, nonsense. I mean, this S-hole thing. completely unnecessary, but the kind of chaotic behavior that this president wants. Did I think he did it on purpose? No, I think he walks into some of this stuff sometimes. But the after effect, the fact that you had their spokesman saying, well, yeah, the president just loves the country, makes you go, what's wrong with these folks? Now, the 63 stores that are going to be closed abruptly, look, stores close. They do. The fact that they did it, and a number of them immediately, they're going to get hit with the Warren Act, and they're going to have to pay these employees for I think it's 90 days. But I look at these companies, and again, I go back to it because it's important to remember. This is all political theater. This is them making us feel better. And the scary thing is when businesses start to come together around this idea that they need to make political statements, because understand this bonus is a political statement. This is not something that they're going to do out of the goodness of their heart. They're not the benevolent, wonderful people that they want you to believe. This is about the politics of this and the massive amounts of money that, look, they're gonna clean up. Trust me. They are going to do very well. Thank you very much. And don't be fooled by it. It's that simple. I do want to go back to the 232 case because I think it is important. It's something that I'm hoping that the president does act on. This is one of those areas, and there are a couple of areas of things that Trump ran on that I said, we absolutely have to do. We've got to deal with some of our trade policies. We've got to deal with some of the things that have gone on and some of the huge disadvantages. Look, last year alone, steel imports rose by almost 18%. Job layoffs notices were going out at steel mills across the country. At least 3 steel mills have announced layoffs. And what that means is, and I keep coming back to this, and our friends over at the Alliance for American Manufacturing put out what I think is just a fantastic book on our national security. And this was done in a bipartisan way. They're not a lefty organization. They're a manufacturing group. They're a business group. But they do happen to think about what employment problems we have in this country. And when they wrote this massive book, it's like 2 inches thick, where they went through all of the things that our national security needs. The nuts and bolts and, magnets for the smart bombs to, chips for the smart bombs to, steel and ocular tube steel and stuff that you didn't even know existed that we need to run a military. And how much of that is outsourced and imported from places like China. And some of the stuff it's shocking that we have to get these smart chips that go into the smart bombs that make them smart. We get those from China, evidently. The magnets in front of the cruise missiles, from what I believe. Those magnets, there was one factory, one plant here in the U.S., I guess about 5 years ago now. One plant used to make that. And a Chinese firm bought it up, came over, boxed it up. The workers had to crate up all of their old machinery, put it in nice, neat boxes, and they shipped it all back to China and recreated the factory in China. And oh, by the way, the workers all had to train their replacements if they wanted their severance. Talk about a slap in the face. And they go through all of these things that if we ever had let's say we had a war with China, do you think they're going to send us smart chips and magnets? No. And, this idea of having a strong manufacturing base to me is extremely important. And this is part of what Trump ran on. And this is what I'm hoping he will do something about. This should have been done already. He asked for it in April. It should have been done by June. Here we are 6 months late. Look, the president's got 90 days to make a decision. He should make that decision tomorrow. Now, we don't know what's in this report. We don't know what this investigation has brought forth, but we know that we're losing our capacity to create steel. We know that we're losing jobs almost daily. His rhetoric has to match what he does. Just a thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. Right back with John Fetterman. John's running for He's running for lieutenant governor here in the great state of Pennsylvania. Love to hear his thoughts. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
It's our worst fear coming to life for us right now.
Record rain and deadly mudslides hit California in the wake of record wildfires. Trump administration reverses expansion of offshore drilling, but only for Florida. Plus,
today, New York City is ending that decades-long pattern of deception and denial by holding these fossil fuel companies to account.
New York City sues the oil industry for climate change damages and will divest from fossil fuels.
All of that divestiture and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
These companies knew as far back as at least the 80s and perhaps earlier that burning fossil fuels would have ruinous impacts on the planet's atmosphere and that it would change our climate, exposing the globe to sea level rise, increased heat, and severe storms.
What do you have against disaster capitalism, sir? This is your Green News Report. So, Desiree, not long ago, a lot of us in Southern California were feeling pretty lucky, given the size of the fires out here, the fact that 44 people had been killed in Northern California, but the death rate was much lower down here. Now we have these floods in the wake of that huge fire in Southern California. And it's clear we really weren't lucky at all.
Yes, it's true. In Southern California, rescuers are now racing to find survivors that were trapped by mudslides and flash floods in areas of Santa Barbara County that had been stripped of vegetation just last month in those record wildfires. Torrential rains on Tuesday night, at one point dumping nearly an inch of rain in only 15 minutes, triggered powerful rivers of mud that demolished more than 100 homes while residents slept. At least 17 people are confirmed dead as of airtime. That number is likely to rise. More than a dozen are still missing.
And is it fair to say that had we not had that huge wildfire in the area that was struck by rain, we would not have seen those mud flows and those deaths?
It's very likely. In a press conference, Santa Barbara County Sheriff Bill Brown said the devastation looks like a war zone.
The only words I can really think of to describe what it looked like was it looked like a World War I battlefield. It was literally a carpet of mud and debris everywhere with huge boulders, downed trees, power lines, wrecked cars.
That same storm system also shattered San Francisco's rainfall record set back in 1872. This storm's destruction comes in the wake of the announcement that 2017 set a record for climate-related extreme weather disasters that cost the United States $306 billion in economic losses.
And frankly, untold numbers of lives. And I gotta say, as far as I know, Donald Trump hasn't said one damn word about what's happened out here in California.
In politics, Trump Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke has reversed a widely condemned proposal to expand offshore drilling, but only for Florida, not any other state. That was after a meeting with Florida's Republican Governor Rick Scott. In a statement, Zinke said, quote, "Florida is unique and its coasts are heavily reliant on tourism as an economic driver."
Yeah, much more unique than those crappy coasts on California, Washington, Oregon, Maine, North Carolina, South Carolina. Who cares about them?
Florida's Democratic Senator Ben Nelson, a longtime opponent of offshore drilling, called the reversal, quote, "a political stunt orchestrated by the Trump administration to help Rick Scott, who is expected to challenge Nelson for the Senate in November."
Trump administration? Political stunts? Not possible.
Democratic and Republican governors of coastal states are also asking to be removed from the offshore drilling expansion, since all of them also have billion-dollar tourism industries that would be harmed by an oil spill. The decision to exempt only Florida in an apparent political favor could also be illegal, violating strict procedures that bar federal agencies from arbitrary and capricious actions, giving ammunition to environmental law groups and states who plan to challenge the administration's offshore drilling. Finally, in a major move, New York City announced on Wednesday it is suing 5 of the world's largest oil companies for damages caused by climate change, and announced that the city's massive pension funds will divest from all fossil fuel investments by 2022. The lawsuit alleges that the oil companies knew that burning their product would cause dangerous global warming and lied about it. Repairs and resilience work to harden infrastructure against extreme weather disasters and rising seas is projected to cost the city more than $20 billion. In a press conference, the city's chief sustainability officer, Dan Zarilli, noted that fossil fuel investments have underperformed the market recently and characterized both moves as an economic imperative.
The impacts of climate change are no longer theoretical. It's not just happening far away. It's here and it's now. We're already spending billions to protect this city, and much more will be needed this century to protect New Yorkers. And that's why the city's lawsuit, filed last night in federal court, is seeking billions in damages to ensure that our city will be ready to withstand these impacts.
The lawsuit is very similar to lawsuits that clawed back billions in damages from the tobacco industry.
Go get them, New York City. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
It's up to you, New York, New York, New York. Now the lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood. The mistakes of the union forever.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. One of the things we want to do here for the majority of 2018 is we want to be talking to candidates who are going to take us back in the right direction, or at least get out there and hammer on the issues that are important to working people. You know, if we've seen anything these last couple of weeks is, look, I think the Republicans see the writing on the wall. Their policies, their direction got them in real trouble. The question is who is going to fill that void? Who's going to step forward? Who's going to lead us in the right direction? That's why I've asked John Fetterman to come talk with us, mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, a guy who's done just outstanding, awe-inspiring work in his community, ran a great race for the Senate in Pennsylvania's Democratic primary, now throwing his name in to run as lieutenant governor. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, it's always awesome to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
So, again, you've all last year you were running and did what I thought was a fantastic job, and now here you've thrown your hat back in the ring. Why?
Yeah, well, I mean, the issues haven't changed. I look back on all the things and the positions that I ran on in 2016, and they've all aged well. I've never had that moment where I was like, gee, why did I have to go out, come out in favor of organized labor? Why did I have to come out in favor of a living wage? Why did I have to come out in favor of, community policing? Why did I have to come out in favor of marijuana legalization? I mean, like, all these things have aged well, and now they're really, even more so. And with Donald Trump, taking over, sucking all the oxygen out of the room, the ability to get a statewide platform to kind of push back against this insanity, it just made the most sense. So that's why I jumped in.
Now, as while running for lieutenant governor, I don't think a lot of people know what lieutenant governors do. I think a lot.
Well, I tell people, back of the envelope, it's like vice president of Pennsylvania. You're there to back up the governor. You're there to be an advocate for the policies and the things that you believe in. You're there to preside over the Senate. And the office allows you to make it a lot of what you believe in. And for me, it's always been about these kind of forgotten communities, places that have been left behind, like my own Braddock, and these places all across Pennsylvania where deindustrialization and the loss of union jobs has really set these places back.
Yeah, I know. I look at the work that you and your wife Giselle have done there in your hometown, and And just like I said at the beginning, it's awe-inspiring, the work that you guys have done. And I know you don't do it for recognition, but I guess your wife was just named. What award did she just get?
Yeah, she was named Pittsburgh City Paper Magazine in Pittsburgh Best Advocate, and she co-founded Best Nonprofit for the City of Pittsburgh, which is 412 Food Rescue, which quote, rescues and repurposes surplus and extra food from grocery stores, Costco, Whole Foods, places like that, and distributes it to families and organizations in need. So she's fantastic, and I have to correct you a little bit. There's nothing awe-inspiring about it. It's nice of you to say, but we're just really working together on these issues that are affecting a lot of Pennsylvania communities and taking it to a larger platform, whether that was to run for the Senate or whether it's now Lieutenant Governor. These issues haven't changed. In fact, I would submit that the need and the level of policy changes and the direction that we're heading makes it even much more so now, since Donald Trump's election.
Yeah, and since you brought that up, I mean, since that election, all of the things that were magnified in 2016, the fact that people are working longer and harder for less, healthcare is just. Well,
I don't mean to interrupt you, Rick, but they just gave $1.4 trillion to the wealthiest people and corporations in America, and they were like giving each other high fives. Pat Toomey was like, "I've been waiting for this for 20 years." I mean, it was like, he achieved his lifelong ambition, and there's no shame involved. There's no apologizing involved. They're still dragging their feet on the CHIP health insurance program for kids. They're talking about, coming to round up DACA and rescinding that protection. All these different policies, and here they are. Here's $1.4 trillion for those in society. Won't agree to raise the minimum wage. Won't, always trying to strip away or make everything right to work. So yeah, I mean, it's strange days, and I'm sure, like a lot of your listeners, have outrage fatigue. What's it going to be this day? Taunt the nuclear power on Twitter? Is it going to be, I'm a stable genius? I mean, just like all kinds of strange things. And I never thought the U.S. presidency would devolve into something like this.
No, I'm right there with you. But you brought up an important issue, because the state of Pennsylvania is right now, they're telling people, families in this state, that if in Congress they don't reauthorize the Children's Health Insurance Program at the end of March, it's done. There's no more money, and your kids are off on their own.
Yeah, and that's scary, especially since we know what their priorities are in terms of the gigantic tax cut. So it's discouraging, but it's also motivating, and again, that's one of the reasons why I'm in this race. And I just would want to remind your listeners, like, it's all on the line this year in Pennsylvania. And if Governor Wolf loses, right to work. Right to work. Boom, that happened. Destructive tax policies, environmental issues. All of these things, a woman's right to choose, all these things that we as Democrats value, are gone if a Scott Wagner takes office and you have a Republican House and a Republican Senate.
Yeah, as a friend told me, if Wolf loses, hello Alabama. It's just where we're going to be.
There you go. Yeah, it's going to be one giant grand experiment, and I like to joke, but it's really not funny that Scott Wagner has the briefcase of all the evil ideas, handcuffed to his wrist, and he carries it around with him. And if he wins, it's like, January 2nd or whatever, he's sworn in. It's like, what do we want to attack first? And that's what I tell people. I'm like, look, I really want to be your next lieutenant governor. There's no question about that. But what the most important outcome in this election here in Pennsylvania is Governor Wolf winning re-election. And everyone has to realize that. I encourage everybody to donate to his campaign. I'm not talking, your listeners don't have $1,000 or whatever, but, $10, $20, $30, $50, get involved, because there is truly so much at stake in this election.
Yeah, and also throw a couple bucks towards your campaign, because sadly these elections come down to money.
Yeah, well, money certainly helps. But it's not the only thing. And again, we raise most of our money from small dollar donations online. Our average donation was $40, and we had just in less than 6 weeks we raised nearly $190,000, and we did it with about 3,000 donors, and that really to me speaks to a grassroots strength, and it speaks to a donor base that's going to continue to give and support us, and we're not bought, and we're not getting money from these moneyed interests.
They're not seeing the drug money and the big multinational money. But here's the thing, and I look at what's going on in this state, and the anger is very real, and I'm sure you see this when you're out on the campaign trail. When people are telling you what their beliefs are, what they want, what's the number one thing that keeps popping up, do you think?
They just want to feel good about things again. I mean, like, I know that sounds, but it's just like we live in really unusual times, out here in Western Pennsylvania, there's been a couple, the coal mines just going to lay off 400 people. You have other layoffs. You have a president, bouncing back and forth, careening back and forth on all these different issues and scandals and everything. And people just want to know that it's like, yeah, hey, great. It's the stock market just broke the new record, but I'm not seeing any of that. Look around at, where I live. Is my community getting better? Is my community, getting more prosperous? And people feel like they have been left behind, and that's only going to continue to accelerate. And it's to me, it's really about economic inequality that we have, certainly here in this area and all across pockets of Pennsylvania. And that really is the essence of my campaign.
At the end of it, it comes down to kitchen table issues. And I've been saying for many years, the Democrats have to get back to that New Deal kind of idea.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And it's like, when people that are voting Republican because they've either given up or they're like, what else do I have to lose? That, we can't let that stand as Democrats, and whether it's in Menneson or whether it's in Braddock or whether it's in McKeesport or Scranton or Shamokin or any of these places across the state, we have to own those places because we are the party that cares about the people that live in those communities. We aren't represented by the ultra wealthy. We aren't represented by strict corporate interest and greed. We need to represent and we need to deliver for those people in those communities.
Do you think it's possible to reach to the Trump voters, to the Republicans who, look, I keep asking the question, when will we believe who the Republicans tell us they are? I mean, they're going after Social Security, going after Medicare. You see this tax heist bill that just happened. You look at all the privatization schemes. You look at the attacks on the Department of Labor. You look at all of this stuff, and you go, when will we believe them?
Well, I think I think people believe them. I just get the sense that, Donald Trump won because enough people felt like they had no other choice. Like, why not roll the dice? And it's like, I don't believe these people we should write them off. I don't have that kind of anger that some people have, where it's like, screw Trump voters. It's like, we're gonna. It's like we need those people. And again, remember, Barack Obama won 2 terms in a commanding fashion.
Right.
So there hasn't been some massive sea change. And of course, you have nationalism and racism, but you've always had that as part of the Republican base. But there are enough reachable people out there. Donald Trump won by big margins in small places, and Democrats have to make sure that we don't concede any county, any community. Even places that we can't win, but we can close the gap from 35 or 40 points down to 15 or 20, and that will make the difference. And that's what made the difference, unfortunately, in Pennsylvania in 2016.
Yeah. Any lessons learned from what just happened in Alabama?
No. I mean, I really was encouraged that Doug Jones won, but it also is kind of sad because he barely just won. And he was running up against what everybody, even the Republicans, agreed was a truly horrible human being, who was banned from the mall because he used to troll for teenagers there, who was accused of all kinds of sexual misconduct. How bad of a Republican and a human being do you have to be in order to lose to a Democrat in Alabama? And it's like you had your answer there. So, I'm elated that Doug Jones won, but I'm also kind of like, that shouldn't have been close. That should have been a 10-point or 15-point blowout instead of, I think it was less than 2 points, or it was around 2%.
Yeah.
Which
it was very narrow.
Discouraging.
That was a very narrow.
Unfortunately, and it shouldn't be that way. And by all accounts, Doug Jones is a good man, and by all accounts, Roy Moore, borderline criminal sociopath. When it comes to those kind of issues.
So let's get back here to Pennsylvania. What do you want people to know? What does John Fetterman do? What does he want to do? Where does he see the vision for the state?
Going on 17 years now, I have worked and served in a community that has literally been left by the side of the road and was essentially written off. And we've built it back up to a place where, things are better, things are going to continue to get better, and we're working back towards the mainstream. And that needs to happen in communities all across Pennsylvania. And that's the message that I tried to bring, that kind of progressive populism, in 2016, that's grounded in true service and grounded in a community like Braddock, and that's why I'm running again for lieutenant governor. And it's like, these are the kind of places that need to do better in Pennsylvania. These are the kind of places that we need to win to keep Pennsylvania blue. And these are the kind of places that we as a Democratic Party should have the moral clarity to own these places, because we are the party that cares about these people and places.
There you go. John, I appreciate the time. I wish you the best of luck, and I'd love to have you come back again as you continue down this road.
Rick, I co-host your show with you. I love being on so much. So please have me on anytime. I'm always grateful, and thanks for having me on.
Good stuff. Next time you're in town, I'll take you up on that. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
Our good friend John Fetterman. You want to check out his website, johnfetterman.com. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You'll listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. European Union leaders are urging President Trump to stick with the 2015 Iran deal during a week in which Trump is required to certify or not certify Iran's continued compliance. British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson stressed that Iran is complying with the agreement, and he said those who doubt the efficacy of the deal should propose concrete alternatives instead of just lobbing insults.
I think it's incumbent on those who oppose the JCPOA really to come up with that better solution, because we haven't seen it so far.
German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel, meanwhile, suggested that at a time the world is trying to contain North Korea, that ripping up the Iran deal would send precisely the wrong message.
It would send a very dangerous signal to the rest of the world. The only agreement which prevents us from the proliferation of nuclear weapons would be negative effect.
President Trump faces a Friday deadline over whether to reimpose sanctions on Iran that were taken down following the 2015 nuclear agreement. The U.S. State Department has unveiled a new travel warning system using a 1 to 4 ranking to grade countries from safest to most dangerous. One country that ranks high up on the threat level is Mexico. On Wednesday, the State Department urged Americans to avoid all travel to 5 Mexican states in a new warning. The Level 4 Do Not Travel alert for Colima, Guerrero, Michoacan, Sinaloa, and Tamaulipas states places those areas on a similar footing as war-torn countries like Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Libya. The State Department cited high levels of violent crime and gang activity in each of those Mexican states. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Our Twitter response of the day comes from Patricia O., who, in response to our comments with Bill Scheer on Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, writes, this is not war. We are watching foreplay. He is man-crushing on Kim Jong-un. 45 is having wet dreams. Since finding out how Kim has a country under his sick thumb, by the way, Trump is wishing, about now that he could create a law that only allows U.S. voters to view Fox and Friends. And look, that's true. I'm pretty sure that that's what he would really want if he could get it. There's our Twitter response of the day. The other story I wanted to get to before we wrap things up, Louisiana. Look, their education system's a disaster. Ever since Katrina, they privatized everything, profitized. It's basically a for-profit haven heaven. A Louisiana teacher had the audacity to stand up and ask why they were giving this board, the school board, was giving a superintendent a $30,000 a year raise, while teachers hadn't seen a raise in years. Class sizes had been growing, facilities have been worsening. There's so many needs. Why are you giving this superintendent a huge $30,000 increase? And it was one of these things where you watch this video in just pure, is this the U.S.? Is this how things work? This woman asked the question in a very polite manner. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She was very, as a matter of fact. And they basically told her, hey, you know what? We're not taking that. We're not taking that now. We're just going to talk about the contract. She's going, I think his pay is part of the contract, right? At the end of this, which is only a couple minutes long, they have a security officer come over and, escort this woman out, and she's leaving. And then all of a sudden you hear in the hallway a scuffle. She's flat down on her face, and this guy's handcuffing her. This is a guy who reportedly has been in trouble, and the district sued because of excessive force. And, you look at this and you go, this is not how school board meetings should be. In fact, everybody in the room wanted to know why the district was giving this massive raise. Now, evidently, they were going to press charges. They've stepped back on the pressing of the charges. And that is a good thing. But we got to get somebody on this. This is just, it's outrageous. Outrageous. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. If you missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. See you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.